conscience of psychiatry for his many decades of successful reform efforts. His scientific and educational work provide the foundation for modern criticism of drugs and ECT and lead the way in promoting more caring and effective therapies. His books include Talking Back to Prozac, Toxic Psychiatry, Medication Madness, Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal, and now, Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Understanding and Overcoming Negative Emotions. Welcome to the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour.
Welcome, my wonderful audience. This is the Dr. Peter Breggin Show. I am called The Conscience of Psychiatry. And today you're going to get a good dose of that, but not just from me, but from Judith Reisman, my amazing guest. She's a PhD, she's a researcher, she's a professor of psychology at Liberty University in the School of Behavioral Science. She has her own institute, the Reisman Institute, and also the Institute for Media Education. But this woman is one of the most important people in our culture. If I get her to stop making faces, the trouble with Judith is she's as old as I am and as full of life as I am. So if you're watching on the TV portion of the show, the radio portion is right now, 4 p.m. on Wednesdays every week. And then Thursday or Friday is the TV portion. And you ought to, if you're listening on the radio, go take a look at the TV portion too, because Judith Reisman is a lot of fun to watch. And she hasn't said a word yet, and she has me giggling. So, anyhow, this woman on the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour, thanks to PRN.FM, which has done this wonderful thing of allowing me to have them film the show as it goes on the air on radio on PRN, and now is a TV presentation every week. It's been going on for a few months now with thousands of listeners and watchers on my Dr. Breggin YouTube channel. It's hard to begin to even describe Judith's importance. Let me take you back in time a little bit. Back in the 1940s, and with the publication of a book on male sexuality in 1948, a man named Alfred Kinsey began to change our culture. He began to push us towards sexual freedom. And if you read through his book, he had a big influence on Hugh Hefner. I'm expecting we'll be talking about that because I'm practically a novice in this area, and the world's expert, Judith Reisman, will begin in a couple of minutes. He began pushing the country toward believing in just shattering heterosexuality, shattering the barrier of sex between adults and children, masquerading child abuse as science. And his book purported to be science. And then he later, in the early 50s, I think, came out with a book on female sexuality, trying to shatter the myths of any kind of chastity, any kind of sexual morality whatsoever, and just opened the way toward the kind of experience that I grew up in, at least certainly by the time I got into my 20s and 30s. When men and women thought they didn't have a good date unless they had had sex. And I went through that phase. And I'm looking back on it now, and I don't think I got hardly anything good out of it. I know I hurt people's feelings. I know I disrupted what people were looking for in the way of love, some of the women. I don't look back favorably on these periods of time in between my marriages. I think we need to reevaluate the whole issue of sex and love and put them back together again. I think and Judith agrees with me here, I think we need to bring back higher ethics into our personal relationships. I think we need a dose of conservatism, folks, in the way we look at sex and love. And this is going to be a problem for so many of you who are watching, and I understand that. But don't just turn down the dial. Listen to what Judith and I have to say, because so much of the sexual revolution was a pack of scientific fraud, outright lies, and immorality. And I really welcome Judith to the show. We've met on one or two occasions way back in the past. We've sort of kept track a little bit of each other. And I have profound respect for her work and looking forward more to her friendship. So, Judith Reisman, welcome to the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter Breggin. I have to tell your audience, it is such an honor for me. I've done a lot of shows in my life. Yeah, it is such an honor for me to be on your program. It's such an honor for me to be able to converse with you, to converse with you, and through that to your audience, because I have such profound respect for you. I follow you. I followed you in the back in the day, yeah, when you took down the whole psychiatric lobotomy industry, yeah, and it was an industry and it was doing such harm. And you stood absolutely alone. You were the only medical professional who, and nobody else could speak about it, who would listen to anybody but a medical professional who took down, who criticized, who investigated, who spoke out. Anyway, I go on, so I'm delighted to be here.
Now, you have not only been the critic of the Alfred Kinsey Institutes and all the various books and articles that followed and the research, you've actually gotten a say in government circles about some of this over the years. And I find that extremely interesting. And I, folks, we didn't set up what how the show would progress, but I think it might be really interesting. I mean, you talk about some of the committees that you were on. Is that a good way to begin? Some of the places you tried to explain to people what was really going on with Alfred Kinsey and his colleagues and his best-selling books and the people who worshipped him as a great scientist and liberator of humanity?
Yes, indeed. And still do. And they still do. I get this Google news feed thing, and maybe once a week, there's something about Kinsey, in some article. Kinsey, what he said about men and women. Well, a lot of it you can't even say yet, still on YouTube. I mean, but yeah, so there's always stuff about Kinsey. The Kinsey Institute's alive and well. It is functioning at Indiana University as we speak. They just had a sex fest. A sex
fest?
Yes.
At Indiana University.
Yes, yeah, at the Kinsey Institute. No, at Indiana University. On campus, they had a wonderful sex fest. It was jolly. You could look at the pictures of a young woman who lets herself be tied up in the day of Me Too, and the rights for women and all that campaigning. She's tied up and a guy is hitting her, beating her with a whip. She's got underpants on, and a little shirt, but that's something that they're celebrating at this sex fest. Well, let me explain the reason. I mean, it's just following the Kinsey method from the beginning, from 1948. He also, was a sadist, a sadomasochist, amongst other things. Amongst other things. And we can maybe talk about that shortly. I don't know. But anyway, that was part of what I saw when I looked at his tables and his documents in sexual behavior in the human male. I looked at those documents. I looked at those tables. I said, wait a minute. This guy is describing in one chart, 317 children, infants and children, 2 months of age to 14 years, most under age 12, having orgasms. Yeah, he called it an orgasm. And I said, what does he mean by that? You know, what is his definition, right? So I look it up in his book under ORGASM, and you go to page 160 and 161, and he's describing children and infants who are screaming, writhing in pain, having convulsions, fainting, striking, these are quotes, striking the partner. Excuse me. I said, this Kinsey, is a sadomasochistic homosexual. I mean, because he's talking about boys, little boys in that case. And he said, and they definitely enjoy the situation.
You know, I want to stop a second because I don't want to think of him as a homosexual any more than if he was abusing little girls, I'd want him to be a heterosexual. I think it's just child abuse. I think it's a little confusing there. It's child abuse.
Fair enough.
And I have nothing at all against gay men, gay women, mature adults enjoying themselves, loving, getting married, having their lives. I'm okay on all of that. I'm not okay on what this is, which is child abuse, which you're describing, of a horrendous nature that you were the first person to call him on.
Yes, absolutely the first person. The first, and really for a long time, almost nothing.
When did you first call him on that?
Okay, going back to Playboy. When my daughter was 10, she was raped by the boy upstairs. He was 13. Now, when I found out, I didn't find out for a year, you know, kids do not disclose, right?
Right.
Yeah. So when I realized what had happened, and of course, by that time he was gone. His mom had sent him off to London, where he came from. I said, well, we have to tell the police. And my daughter said, no, I don't want to tell anybody. And what I realized later was it's a bloody good thing, because telling the police at that time, I didn't realize there's a peer abuse place that you can rape or sexually assault. If it's between 5 years of the child and 5 years of the person who does it, you have an open sesame for that. You're not going to get criticized. You're not going to, well, you might criticize, you know, but you won't get criminal time. And the things that she would be put through, you know, in the police situation would be not worth it. Well, anyway, so I read about, I'm looking at this Playboy thing, and it turns out the guy upstairs had stacks of Playboy. He used them, and his younger brother, the little boy rather, and his younger brother, both of them, they were using Playboy, yeah? And so I went, later on I thought, what is that about? I mean, in those years, we're talking 1960, you know, you thought it was a girly magazine, right? That was the impression.
Right, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a girly magazine. Okay, so they have naked. I thought that was pretty stupid, right? Because if you're a person, you want to be with a real human being person. You know, you don't want to play with paper dolls all the time. But anyway, so I didn't pay that much attention. But later, I found that, how did I? Oh yeah, that was when I was, okay, so I went to Wales for a British Psychological Association conference on love and attraction. British Psychiatric Association conference, I think it was, on love and attraction. And I was going to present my material. I had been doing research on Playboy. And I discovered that they had pictures of kids. There were cartoons of kids in Playboy. And those cartoons were little black and white cartoons of a boy. Here we are with the boys, watching or just commenting on the sex between these adults. Then that graduated to larger pictures, and finally girls Yeah, girl pictures with a girl in bed with the man. We didn't mind so much the
Define a girl so we can
6 years
visualize
old,
that. Wow.
6 years old, 7 years old.
Does that
And
still go on
no, they
in
stopped it. They stopped it when my report.
Good work.
Yeah, my report.
Congratulations.
Yeah, they stopped it at that point, but they bring it back every once in a while, testing the waters, but nothing since. Okay, that was 1984, but it went from 1954, from that first year, to 1984. From 1954 to 1984, they were conditioning us. They were conditioning the users, the readers, or not readers, the users. They were conditioning us, men and then boys, women and girls, right, to accept children as viable sex targets in bed with some guy. She's in bed. It's all in my reports. It's all on my website. It's all in my books.
How do people get most directly to your website?
The Reisman Institute.org. That's TheReisman Institute.org.
So take the connection now to Kinsey. Where does Kinsey connect to you, Hefner, to Playboy?
Okay, so here I am just doing my research on Playboy when I was doing my PhD, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of my kids, so I'm looking at the Playboy and I want to see what he's been looking at, the boy upstairs, right? Okay, so I go to Wales at the British Psychological Association, or Psychiatric, I don't know which one, on Love and Attraction, and that was in 1976, I think, something like that. And I have my slides. I have two. We used to do 2 sets of slides, right? So I have my slides, and I'm showing my slides, and there's a guy there, a psychologist from Canada. And the guy from Canada early on had said to me, there are no kids in Playboy. Absolutely not. And I said, you should come to my presentation. We have 80 slides in each carousel. That's a lot of kids, So, but they grew, what's her name? Brooke Shields and Jodie Foster, those kind, later on. Anyway.
Now, what are you referring to with Jodie and Brooke?
Sexual pictures of Brooke Shields nude were in the material. Okay? All right. At age 12. So anyway.
Was she, how did that happen? How did she, do you have any idea?
Her mother let her. Her mother, not let her. Her mother posed her, put her in. Put her in that situation. There is a lot of reasons.
This is all new to me. I think so much today is going to be new to me.
Well, anyway, so here I am in Wales.
Yeah.
I'm in Wales. All right, this psychologist comes up to me. He says, look, he says, because earlier he'd said there are no kids in Playboy, right? I said, there are cartoons and there are photos. He said, no, it's impossible. He was there with his wife, who was a nurse. And so I said, well, how would you know, So he said, well, I look at it once in a while. So then she said, honey, you always bring copies, home. When you leave, you come back with the copies. And so anyway, so he used it, right? He said there are none. So he came to my presentation, which that's a long story because they tried not to let me do it. And oh boy, that was quite a problem. So anyway, he came, and then at the end, he said to me, he said, I can't believe that I saw all those pictures. He said, they were in my brain. I didn't realize it until you showed them all together. He said, and yet I knew I had processed. They were in.
That is so interesting.
Brain.
So interesting.
Yeah. So then he said to me, Now, he said, the thing is, if you're concerned about child sexual abuse, as I am, as I was, he said, what you have to do is you have to read Kinsey. So I said, Kinsey? I said, what for? You know, I used to know Kinsey. Come on. And he said, I used to work with Kinsey and Pomeroy. That's one of his co-authors. One of his co-authors who he was really a weird guy, you know, who he would have sex with everybody. But anyway, one of his co-authors, and he said, I worked with them. One, here we go with the homosexual. One is homosexual, the other one is a pedophile. And I said, which is which? And he said, read and discover, right? And he walked away. Peter, I don't know the guy, right? I mean, I don't know who he was. I tried looking it up in the procedures, you know, the proceedings, which they took my paper out of the proceedings, by the way. It's the proceedings on love and attraction in 1970, 76. They took my paper out of there, you know? Okay. Anyway, so I said, okay, I go back home and I go to the dirty bookstores because in those years, that's the only place you could find Kinsey, right? So I go to back in the deep, dark, you know, caverns of the dirty bookstore. And I find the two books, Kinsey's two books. I come back and I start looking at them. And I'm thinking, this isn't possible. This is absolutely not possible. Breacher said, you know, he started describing Kinsey, and he's describing what Kinsey was doing with the children. And he says, there was a child. Oh, right. Yes, there's a child that was being sexually touched, right, for a period of time. And he said, he describes that. And he said, but she would, you know, come back. And I'm thinking, he's talking as though these kids are pieces of objects. He's not talking like these are people or children. Okay. So anyway, I start researching it and I say, all right, we will look at all the writings on Kinsey, right? Well, tons of stuff after Kinsey wrote his book. Thousands of articles are appearing. You remember that, right? I mean, that was the start of the sexual revolution. So thousands of articles. Right. Most importantly, four books come out the same year he publishes Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. Four books with the top-notch people in one. Spock, I think, was, no, maybe not Spock.
I hope not Ben Spock.
I don't remember. But a whole slew of major people are writing, and they're all saying he is telling us the truth about ourselves, all right? And this is wonderful. We have to face it and all that kind of thing.
So let me stop. Let me stop for a minute. Try to orient people.
Yes, please.
At this point in time, people did not assume that men who were married, women who were married, had multiple affairs.
Right.
The idea of even thinking about sex with children was totally forbidden. You wouldn't even imagine such a thing except as a horrible abuse and probably extremely rare. And Kinsey wrote about these things. I'm getting an echo on my voice. Is that what I think that we're getting? I'm just having, it's back to normal now. There's a lot of little technological problems today. Maybe outside forces are disrupting us from this important community.
Yes, I know. I'm having that impact. Yeah.
And Kinsey came out and he said to the world that people are having affairs all the time, men, women, ages, sexes, different sexes, same sexes. And he wrote about men stimulating little infant girls and boys as if it was science.
Right, exactly.
And I remember seeing the books. I think I read one of them the male book. I think I read it in high school. I'm not sure. I was reading different things. I did not get what all this abuse was. And it never dawned on me that these were lies and fraud.
Yeah.
And what we owe to you is that you really put together in books. I'm looking at a book here. I won't hold it up because they don't show well, but Stolen Honor, Stolen Innocence. This is the fourth edition, basically, of an earlier book. Stolen Honor, Stolen Innocence, Judith Reisman, PhD, with a ton of information. And I want to orient people to that. This changed the culture. You've drawn that picture, books started coming out. Was Hugh Hefner directly influenced? Do we have a direct connection? Let me just ask you a couple of questions to sort of build around this. How was he oriented? How did Hefner get involved in this?
Well, it's like most college guys. It was, Kinsey pitched it for college guys at first, Joe College. If you change Joe College, you change the world.
Right.
So he pitched it for Joe College. He would go, the colleges pushed it in all the colleges. Well, Hefner picked it up and he reads it, and he reads that, his mother and his father have been lying to him all this time. They probably have been having sex, but he's not going to ask them, People didn't ask, right? And even if he asked, you figure.
But just having sex or sex with multiple partners?
The sex, probably they weren't having sex with their marital partner, right? I mean, Hefner, that, and he.
But there is a direct connection that Hefner has acknowledged between
he says
that whole revolution.
Not only would he be Kinsey's pamphleteer, but his philosophy, the Playboy philosophy, he does 4 books, or it's more than that. And, stage, he's a philosopher. They're all from Kinsey. He's quoting Kinsey here. He's quoting Kinsey there. Pages and pages.
It's very, very, very important.
Because a quarter of our married women were supposed to have had abortions, right? They were committing adultery and having abortions.
And now, again, I didn't know that. This is just so important. So that was Kinsey maintaining that a quarter of women had abortions.
And 85% of the not married women who were pregnant, he said, aborted the children. And the issue is no consequences. There was no fallout. We didn't have any venereal disease to count. There was syphilis.
And I'm sure he didn't address the suffering that some women felt after these experiences.
No. What he said was that virginity was a terrible burden. His first issue said there was in that first year, wives. Now
he is Hefner. You're talking about Hefner now.
Hefner.
Yeah, not Kinsey, but Hefner.
No. Now we're off to his pamphleteer.
Okay.
Yeah. Hefner said in his very first issues, all marriage is for the alimony. Women want you for your money. That's what he's telling the college boys. Women want to marry you for your money. As soon as you're married, you'll end up paying through the nose. She will, get furs and whatever. She's going to have a good time, and you're going to lose all your money. So he does a major piece on that. Virginity, huge attack on virginity. That's where he tells his readers there are ways that you can cheat her out of her virginity. And he describes it. I mean, his writers do, step by step. You bring her how you trick her. Of course you promise marriage. Of course you do that. He said, but there are other ways too. But don't just rely on getting her drunk, because that's coarse.
Okay. Let me again. I want to fill in some of this amazing stuff you've done. Now, who was supporting? What are some of the people were supporting in particular? Kinsey. Did Hefner, by the way, I don't know the answer. Did he go on to support Kinsey?
Yes, of course he did. Of
And
course.
who else was supporting Kinsey?
The Rockefeller Foundation, big time. The Rockefeller Foundation, 1941, starts supporting Kinsey big time. They may, I mean, the books that are printed, the publicity that goes out, the mass media blitz, all of that.
Did he
comes
have
out-
government? Did he have government support?
No, he did not at the beginning. He did not. He didn't have government.
Did he have
Well,
some eventually?
yes, yeah. He ended up with 21 million at a certain point that he was getting out of the government. But let me back
Through
up.
whom? Wait a minute, I want to ask you some questions because I know some of this is going to be so important. And again, we're talking with Judith Reisman. And Judith, what government agencies would have funded him?
Ah,
If you don't remember, that's fine too.
there was
But just,
one. No, I don't. I don't remember.
but there
that.
he was getting many millions from what you're saying.
Yeah, we did an analysis of the monies that he received. There's a whole
Right.
printout.
Okay, so let me redirect it again. What I want to get across to people here was Kinsey was lying a lot. He was just not giving data a lot. But who were the kinds of people that he was supposedly getting his data from? The prisoners, the convicted
convicted pedophiles.
files. Talk about where it turns out he's getting his data. Not that I would even believe his data then.
Right.
But where was he when you started looking into it? Where was he getting his data from?
Well, the critical thing there is page 10. He tells you that he collected his data. 86% of it was during World War II. So in his book, when he thanks all these various agencies and whatnot for contributing to his data, he never says Navy, Army, Marines, because nobody in those years, I'm sure you remember, nobody in those years was allowed to speak about their lives, personal stuff. It was, big posters up, loose lips sink ships,
Right.
Yeah, all the propaganda everywhere. So you never spoke, and the military was never allowed, nor would people who are working on military things at home, in any factories. So he got prisoners, yes. Here we go with the homosexuals, but these guys were not allowed in the army at that time, okay? And definite pedophiles, oh yeah. And what he called the feeble-minded, he called that. And very importantly, he would go into orphanages, he would go into all kinds of places, prisons. Yeah. And that's where he got his sample, if you call it a sample, right?
So this was in no way a sample of Mr. and Mrs. Jones living in Indiana, near Indiana University.
Right. No way. And then he goes to California because everything that he lied about gets translated into our laws through the American Law Institute Model Penal Code. The American Law Institute Model Penal Code is built in 1955 to stand on these truths about our sexuality. Okay? So what he does is he goes to California and he testifies because some little girls were found murdered, right? And the California people were furious and angry and upset. And they said, we need tougher laws. We need to keep our guys, people in prison longer. We shouldn't be letting them out. He comes to California, and then many other states after that. He comes to California and he makes statements. We have those transcripts where he claims that children, he actually says that we examined hundreds of children. He says they had, they had sex with men, right? But they were never harmed. There was no harm. He says look, Peter, with all,
It's awful.
I shouldn't be upset about it still. Okay, he says he interviewed 4,441 women, okay? And that none of there was no rape that was harmed anybody. No, there wasn't no problem.
He actually said that rape didn't harm women.
Yes, 4,441 women. Okay, so so we start believing rapists. We start believing psychopaths. He was a.
Did he argue that children enjoyed the sexual stimulation?
Absolutely. And he's not only that, but he said, and it's come back, I hear this very often from people who have been sexually abusing kids. In the old days, they just used to quote Kinsey. They just used to quote him. Now they quote his derivatives, people, who say the same thing. Yes, he says that given the appropriate opportunity, the youngest child, the youngest infant, would be able to enjoy having sex with either his peers or with an older person or an older adolescent. And they would enjoy it and they could orgasm.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? It was that insane.
Now, Kinsey,
with no bad results. No bad results.
You tried very hard to get Kinsey's data. Other people, I think, after you, didn't they try to get Kinsey's data? There's never been any disclosure of where 4,500 of this or that came from, has there?
No, there has not. We tried. I was invited here. I was in Israel at the time. I left here. I left the United States. I went to Israel.
When was that there?
In 76, no, 77.
Okay, just a general idea.
80-ish, 1980-ish. I'm not,
okay. So what was going on then?
A lot of years.
Yeah. So what were you doing at that point?
Well, I was at the University of Haifa University.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working there, doing research there. And I got a phone call one day from at home, a Pat Buchanan.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy says, my name is Pat Buchanan. I'm sure you don't know me. He says, but I just read about your research, he said, and I want to know if you're going to stand by it. So I said, stand by it, of course.
Now, was he an assistant to the president at that time?
Yes. I was a speechmaker or something.
Folks, Pat Buchanan, very conservative, so conservative that there are issues surrounding, some of what his beliefs are.
Yeah.
But he's also a person who's done valuable things.
Yeah. There are sides to people, right? Many sides.
I mean, we're both Jewish. There's been issues about his issues around his Jewish views. Do you have any idea about whether he's an anti-Semite?
He's not.
Not. Okay.
Not.
All right. So now, okay. Go ahead.
So anyway, so he says, he wants to write about it. Okay. So I say, yeah, sure, go ahead, write about it. So he does a big column in his paper, right? Time magazine he sent some people down from Time magazine to interview me, but they did not seem at all, interested, right? So the next thing I know, I'm flown out to the United States to do his show, Crossfire, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. Tom Braden, and that was the liberal guy, and the other side was supposed to be Pat Buchanan. Okay, so I'm flown out here. So I do Crossfire, right? And I go down to Crossfire, and they say, well, we've been threatened. The Kinsey Institute has called, and they threatened to sue them, but they don't care because they got a lot of insurance. But they'll sue me, and I said, what do I care? I don't have any money. What make a difference to me? Yeah. Anyway, so, but that's interesting, right? That's the beginning.
It's so similar to my own experiences when I started doing the anti-psychosurgery campaign, and then especially when I took on the drug companies. Yeah.
Right. Which is very much involved in what I'm talking about. The drug companies. But anyway.
Well, do you want to clarify briefly that little interesting divergence there? I mean, you were telling me that when we were talking earlier off the air, that there was a connection because you felt the drug companies benefited from the breakdown of the family, that they were aware on some level that this was going to help them sell drugs for kids and stuff like that.
Sure. Viagra, when our guys can't function. Okay. Now the female Viagra, maybe, which may be covered by Medicare and whatever. Viagra is covered.
Now, what is your connection between sexual dysfunction and the sexual revolution? I have no idea what your answer is. I have some thoughts about it too. What do you think about that?
Oh, well, the sexual revolution precedes the massive sexual dysfunction. What's his name used to write about the big problem. Women would come in and they would complain because this was before Viagra, which kept it going, keeps the guy functioning. They would come in. It was Rollo May, I think it was Rollo May, wrote, and he said women would complain because he wants sex all the time. Then we started going through this period when they don't want sex all the time. Of course, we moved into it now where they don't want sex at all. A portion of our people. But yeah, I mean, sexual dysfunction, it makes big pharma rich as can be.
Let me comment on that for a minute and sort of bring in what my own thoughts are.
Pornography.
Let me hang on a second.
Yeah.
I think that a good sexual life, and I've lived a long time, and I've been married more than once, and been married now 35 years, 38. I think it's getting near 38. We've been together, me and Ginger, and I really think that without the connection between sex and love,
right,
sex loses a lot of its allure, a lot of its pleasure. I certainly think somebody could have a one-night drug stand that he remembers as sexually exciting or something like that. But in my conversations with men, and especially during the 60s and 70s when I was seeing people, as I am now, and I'd see men with just multiple partners and some women, but mostly men, or at least who would talk about it, and they did not enjoy their sexual lives. It was frustrating, it was shallow, and their relationships were frustrating and shallow. And I think that this is a major issue that I want to write more about, and will be writing more about in one way or another. Guys, I think it's a very, very key issue. I don't know what my wonderful audience thinks about these issues, but that is definitely some of what I'm thinking. And you could comment and on this on my YouTube. You could comment on what you think about this issue of on this YouTube show when it becomes a YouTube show. Hopefully without some of the hitches that I put into it with my technology. But I think these are very big issues for the culture. Judith, let you respond to that.
Oh, absolutely. I write about one of my books was Soft Porn Plays Hardball. Okay? Soft porn plays hardball. And that's where I go into a lot of this and the connections between and all that. But yeah, the sense of family, the sense of love existing between a woman and a man, and surviving adversity and then being able to produce children and so on. That's life. And when you don't have life, you don't have life, you know? And the quest then all the time for the stimulation. Now that's where we get into the pornography, you know, the stimulation that you get from. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think there's any question. Pornography I define as an erototoxin. You talk about,
neurotoxins.
Neurotoxins.
Psychiatric drugs are neurotoxins. Yes.
Well, I define all pornography, which includes Playboy, as an erototoxin.
I have experience with that in terms of the people in my practice. We get to talk about the effects of pornography. And I've never seen anybody who watched pornography as if he were loving the woman or involved, or the man involved, depending whether the man's gay, whether we have a gay man or a woman or heterosexual. It's usually without love. It's something else, often aggression, but it's not like it tunes you up for lovemaking.
Not at all. And the other thing is people are always ashamed. They're always ashamed. No matter how much they try to claim that they're not when they're using pornography, they sneak in to the dark. Even if they do, they're always ashamed of what they're doing. What does that tell you? If they're ashamed, it tells you there's something really to be ashamed of. Because
no, I won't go there with you, Judith.
No, let me finish.
No, hang on a minute. You and I have some different interpretations of life, and I want to make clear. I don't think the fact that somebody's ashamed means they deserve to be ashamed at all.
I'm not saying
it
that.
could be a cultural phenomenon that they're ashamed.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
That is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The shame that they feel is not from inside. It is something that they are experiencing around them. They know that what they're doing isn't helpful to them, and it's hurtful to the people they're looking at. That's what I'm saying. They know they're doing something bad because what they're doing is using that image that that person who's on that screen, they feel it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what people feel really is the lack of love. They have an awareness
feeling that this person has.
Hang on a second. I think that to some extent, what people are feeling under those conditions is they really want love. They want a loving sexual relationship on some level, and they're sensing that that's not what it is, and they don't allow themselves to feel love when they're involved in pornography.
But they can't, because the person at the other end, they are suspecting, was an abused person, was a neglected person, was a harmed person.
I don't know if people are suspecting that or not. But I agree with you that it's the objectification of women. I don't think it's a good thing. I think
that's what they're experiencing, and I have reason to think.
Or the objectification of men or other men.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's what causes the shame.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very complicated. I don't have quite the amount of certainty about it all that you do, but I think it's an amazing conversation we're having. I hope it'll be an interesting and valuable one. I want to say a few words. We've got about 9 minutes left. I really believe in love, and Judith and I both really, really believe in love.
Yeah.
I believe that people can love each other in a variety of relationships. I think that there's a lot of variety of sex. I'm totally against adult child. I think that should be a criminal. I think the issue is so much about love, and I don't care whether it's between two men or two women. I don't care if it's heterosexual. I believe that bodies are made to express love. I think that Passion is the body's expression of love. And I really want to emphasize that I think that it is one of the most beautiful and important expressions that we have. And I think it goes way beyond just the sexual act. One of the things I'm so aware of at my age is just the sweetness of touching Ginger's cheek on her facial cheek, or just the pleasure of patting her hand. I'm aware of the pleasure she has looking at my face and that I have looking at her face. And that has a sexual glow to it, but it's different to some extent than having sex. But it's sweet and it's good. And as you get older, you really get to experience, and maybe some younger people, I didn't experience it quite as much when I was young. I had growing up to do, but I really believe that sex and love come together with the body and the heart and the soul.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, what Judith believes as well. And that's what life is about. But I think that Kinsey helped destroy that. He made sex the end in itself. He broke down all morality. He broke down all the important barriers having to do with rape and sex abuse and the abuse of children, and so many of us, as I did when I was younger and read it, we didn't put two and two together and realize, my God, this is a book of pornography and sex abuse. What's all the praise, and what is his science? And at no point, as far as I know, did Kinsey ever reach the level of genuine science. He picked here and there, and he tended to pick from people who were in deep trouble emotionally and often in deep trouble because they were in jail. And that this just, as Judith has said earlier, this has contributed to a lot of things in our society that we need to take second looks at and look at more deeply. Does that fit with your thinking, Judith? I think I've lost Judith. We are coming to the end of the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you, my wonderful audience, for the Peter Breggin Hour.